stars were quiet that night in the far edge of the Galactic. Empire's territory, but the calm did not last long. The Deep Space Patrol ship Varel 7 was gliding through the darkness when its sensors picked up something strange at first. The crew thought it was just debris drifting in the void, but the readings kept growing clearer and sharper. There were ships out there in the black, more than a dozen of them, moving in perfect formation without broadcasting any identification signal. No trade beacon, no diplomatic code, no voice message, just cold silence that pressed against the ears of those who stared at the screen. Lieutenant Krath reported to his captain that the unknown fleet was approaching slowly but directly. The captain, who had served the Empire for 40 years, laughed softly. Believing no one would dare to cross this border without permission, he ordered a standard hailing message to be sent. But the system showed no reply. He tried again, using the Empire's most aggressive warning codes. Still nothing. The strange fleet just kept moving forward like predators that already knew their prey would not escape. When the images finally came through, the crew was unsettled. The ships were not like any known design. In the Galactic records, their hulls were matte black, without any shining banners or glowing insignias. They absorbed the starlight instead of reflecting it. The shapes were sharp and clean, almost too perfect. And they moved with such precision that even the computer tracking system hesitated. As if confused by the pattern, the captain decided to send 3 fast destroyers ahead to intercept and demand identification. The destroyers sped forward and locked weapons, but before they could fire or even send a second warning, their systems went dead. The crew of the Varel 7 watched in shock as the destroyers drifted powerless across space. Their engines cold and their lights gone, no explosions, no visible attacks, just sudden lifeless silence. The unknown ships passed them without slowing down, ignoring the helpless destroyers, as if they were already forgotten. Reports reached the nearest Imperial command station within minutes. The officers there reacted with the usual arrogance. The Galactic Empire had ruled these sectors for centuries. They had crushed rebellions, fought rival empires, and defeated countless pirate fleets. No, mysterious strangers could be a real threat. The commander on duty ordered more ships to intercept, sending a clear message to the unknown intruders to turn around or face destruction. Yet deep down, some officers felt a faint unease. The enemy had disabled 3 destroyers in seconds without even firing a shot. That was not normal. The command station tried once again to scan the intruders for any hint of weakness, but every time they attempted to break into the strange ships' communication channels, they received only one sound. A short repeating clip of low human laughter. The sound was faint, but carried a certain calmness that was more chilling than a direct threat. It was not the laughter of a fool or a madman. It was the laughter of someone who already knew how this would end. As the fleet advanced further into Imperial space, more patrols were sent to watch them. None reported any aggressive moves, yet somehow every ship that came to close lost power for several minutes before systems returned. The intruders never fired first, never spoke, and never seemed in a hurry. It was as if they were testing the Empire's patience, watching and waiting for something unseen. Far away in the Empire's capital, the High Council received the first full visual recordings.
Ow.
They gathered in the great chamber under the giant star map of the galaxy. The Emperor himself studied the images silently. The strange black ships moved like pieces on a game, bored already knowing their winning move. The Emperor's advisors assured him that the fleet was small, only 20 ships at most, and could be destroyed easily. But the Emperor frowned. He had fought in wars before, and he knew that true danger did not always come from numbers. It came from intent, and these ships radiated intent. Meanwhile, the Terran fleet continued forward. Each move seemed deliberate, each pause carefully placed. They never showed their weapons, never tried to intimidate openly, yet their presence alone was heavy like a shadow that grew larger with each passing hour. On one observation deck of the lead Terran vessel, a human stood watching the stars. His uniform was simple, dark gray, without rank markings. His face calm, his eyes unreadable. Then slowly, as if aware that somewhere far away someone was watching, he smiled on the Imperial command station. An officer monitoring the visual feed froze when the image appeared. The human's expression was not one of mockery nor of friendliness. It was something else entirely. This was the smile of a predator looking at prey that had already been caught. The officer hesitated to report this detail, thinking it unimportant, but deep down, he felt something he could not explain. By the time the Imperial fleet finally mobilized for a full confrontation, the Terrans were already within striking distance. Of 3 important supply routes, Imperial warships began to assemble in large numbers, preparing to block the unknown fleet. Once again, warnings were sent, and once again the only reply was that faint human laughter echoing through the speakers. The sound seemed louder this time, slower, as if savoring the moment. The Empire still believed they were in control, still believed their firepower, and numbers would crush any threat. But the Terran fleet did not change course and did not slow down. They were coming, and they already knew exactly what they were going to do next. The news of the silent invaders spread quickly through the Empire's military channels, but most officers still treated it as a small problem to be erased with a single decisive strike. In the capital city, the Great Chamber was filled with military leaders, nobles, and High Council members, all speaking over each other. Some argued for diplomacy, others demanded immediate annihilation of the strangers. The Emperor finally raised his hand and the room fell silent. His voice was calm but cold. He would send the Empire's most feared strategist, Admiral Kareth, to lead the response. Kareth was a legend in the Navy, known for victories against fleets twice his size and for crushing entire rebellions. In days when he received the order, his eyes lit up with quiet pride. He promised the Emperor that these intruders would not cross another Imperial border alive within hours. Kareth's flagship, the Valorian Spear, was leading an armada of over 200 ships to intercept the silent fleet. The plan was simple: surround the intruders, cut off their escape, and demand unconditional surrender before destroying them.
Wow.
The Terran fleet was still moving at the same steady speed, showing no signs of concern the moment Kareth's ships entered. Sensor range, the Imperial channels began blasting high-intensity warnings in multiple languages, but the intruders remained quiet, their black holes drifting closer in perfect formation. Finally, Kareth ordered his communications officer to open a direct visual channel. If they would not answer words, they would answer to a face. The view screen lit up, and the image appeared. A single Terran ship in the center of the formation, one bridge, one human captain sitting in the command chair. His hair was dark, his uniform plain, but his presence was sharp like a blade. His eyes looked directly into the camera, and after a long moment, he smiled. It was not a friendly smile, and not a mocking one. It was a slow, confident expression that made several junior officers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Kareth spoke firmly, identifying himself, and ordering the Terrans to power down their weapons and submit to boarding. The humans said nothing. Then the bridge lights on several Imperial ships flickered. Kareth glanced at his engineers, but before they could report, the truth became obvious. Systems were shutting down all over the fleet. Weapons went offline, engines slowed, navigation froze, ship reported power losses, but not complete destruction, just enough to make them helpless. Within minutes, nearly half of Kareth's 200 ships were drifting powerless in space. No explosions, no boarding parties, no visible attack. The Terran fleet had disabled them without firing a single shot. Kareth's jaw tightened, but he refused to retreat. He ordered the remaining active ships to spread out and prepare for close-range engagement, yet when they tried to lock weapons, the targeting systems failed to every attempt to scan. The enemy returned static, followed by the same unsettling sound, a faint human laugh repeating slowly through the speakers. The Terrans began to move again, not toward the powerless Imperial ships, but directly through the center of Kareth's formation. As if daring him to act, the Valorian Spear itself trembled slightly as the lead Terran vessel passed so close, its shadow covered the bridge windows. Kareth could see figures inside, standing at their observation deck, watching quietly. That same captain still smiling, as if nothing in the galaxy could touch him. When the Terran fleet was nearly out of visual range, Kareth finally regained partial power to some of his disabled ships, but by then the strangers were already gone deeper into Imperial territory. It was not an attack. It was a message, and it was received loud and clear. The Empire's most feared admiral had been ignored and humiliated without a single shot fired. Back in the capital, the Emperor listened to Kareth's report without expression around him. The High Council whispered nervously, wondering if this was some new, unknown technology or a sign of something far worse. The Emperor dismissed the chatter. His voice was soft but carried weight. He had seen that kind of confidence before, and it had never belonged to a weak enemy. He ordered every major fleet in the sector to be mobilized, and every intelligence unit to find out who these Terrans were, but deep inside, he already knew this was not going to be a simple war. This was something different, and the enemy was smiling because they knew it too. The Emperor's orders spread through the military like wildfire. Every fleet commander in the sector was told to be ready. Every supply line was reinforced. Every mining world was placed under heightened security. The Empire wanted to trap the Terran fleet before it reached the inner systems. Admiral Kareth was given a second chance, this time with full reinforcements and a plan that could not fail. He would lure the intruders into the Dalvorn system, a heavily fortified star system surrounded by minefields, armed defense stations, and cloaked missile platforms no fleet had ever entered Dalvorn without being torn apart. The bait was simple. Kareth ordered a transport convoy to move slowly through space along a route the Terrans were certain to cross. The convoy carried no real cargo, but its signal codes would make it look like a high-value target on any scanner. If the Terrans attacked the convoy, they would be pulled into the killing ground of Dalvorn. The fleet waited hidden in the asteroid belts, while the defense stations stood ready with weapons charged. Every commander was certain this would be the end of the mysterious invaders. The Terran fleet appeared on schedule. Just as the trap had predicted, they changed course toward the convoy. Without hesitation, the Empire's fleet moved into position. The mines were armed, the stations locked onto targets, and Kareth gave the signal to trigger the closing maneuver. The gap between the Terrans and Dalvorn shrank quickly, but then something happened that no one expected. The minefields began to detonate early. One after another, they exploded in blinding flashes far from the Terran ships, ripping apart Imperial defense drones and damaging nearby stations. Kareth demanded a systems check. His engineers reported in disbelief that the activation codes for the mines had been rewritten. Remotely, all of Dalvorn's automated defenses were firing at random or not at all. The cloaked missile platforms began launching on their own, targeting empty space or even friendly ships. The trap was collapsing before the first Imperial shot was fired. The Terrans moved forward as if nothing was wrong, gliding through the chaos. Without taking a single hit, desperate Kareth ordered his fleet to open fire manually, but before they could aim properly, the Imperial targeting systems went blind. Every screen filled with static, every lock failed. The enemy ships seemed to fade in and out of sensors as if they were ghosts. The only thing that cut through the noise was that sound again, slow and deliberate human laughter echoing across every channel. The sound was not mocking, it was patient, almost like someone explaining that this was not a fight, this was a lesson. One of the Imperial frigates managed to disable a small Terran drone drifting on the edge of the battle zone. The wreckage was brought aboard for study, and what the engineers found shook the command staff. The drone's data core was full of maps, charts, and detailed military records. All of it belonged to the Empire, and some of it was so classified that even Kareth had never seen it. It meant the Terrans had been watching the Empire for years, maybe decades, studying every strength, every weakness, waiting for the right moment to appear. When Kareth saw the human captain's image appear once more on his bridge screen, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Not anger, not even fear. It was the cold weight of understanding. The captain's calm voice came through for the first time, a voice deep and steady, without a trace of effort. Your turn is over. Then the transmission ended, and the Terran fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, disappearing into the inner reaches of the Empire's territory. In the capital, the Emperor listened to the full report without moving. His advisors argued about technology, theft, spy networks, and sabotage, but the Emperor was silent. He knew what it meant when an enemy dismantled your best. Trapped without even trying it meant they had already decided the outcome long before the battle had begun. And if that was true, the real war had not even started yet. The Emperor summoned his most trusted intelligence officers to the Great Chamber. The Terran fleet's ability to dismantle the Dalvorn trap had shaken even the most arrogant commanders. It was no longer a question of firepower, but of knowledge. Someone who knew the Empire's deepest secrets was guiding these humans. The Emperor demanded every record of the Terran's history. No matter how small, his spies began pulling reports from forgotten archives, intercepted transmissions, and even Old war stories told by alien traders, what they uncovered was worse than expected. The humans were not a young race wandering into the galaxy by accident. They had been through wars that would have erased most civilizations from existence. They fought the titan beasts of Drath, creatures so large they could devour a city in one night, and they won. They endured the radiation storm wars, surviving in poisoned worlds where no other species could live. They destroyed the silent AI of Helios, an artificial intelligence that had enslaved 3 star systems and was thought impossible to kill. Every battle record had one thing in common. The humans started with less but ended with everything. The Emperor stared at the reports for a long torrent. His advisors insisted these old wars were exaggerated legends, but deep down he knew they were real. He had seen the kind of confidence those stories created. The smile of the Terran captain was not born from arrogance, but from certainty. He was dealing with a people who had already survived the impossible. The Empire's usual methods, intimidation, overwhelming force, sudden strikes, would mean nothing to them. Far from the capital, another Imperial fleet engaged the Terrans near the Sarath Belt, hoping to catch them in the narrow channels between massive drifting rocks. The Sarath Belt had crushed hundreds of reckless pirate ships over the years. The Imperial fleet moved in with careful precision, confident that the dangerous terrain would limit the humans' movements. But the Terrans navigated the rocks as if they had memorized every drift, every shadow. They used the debris to shield themselves from incoming fire and struck back with surgical precision. Imperial ships exploded one by one until the survivors retreated in panic. Word of the defeat spread through the military ranks quickly. For the first time, Imperial officers were whispering about fear, not of the Terran weapons, but of their patience and control. The humans never rushed, never panicked. Even when outnumbered, they seemed to know exactly what the Empire would do before it happened. That was not luck. That was preparation in the capital. The Emperor gathered his war council again. His face was calm, but his tone left no room for debate. The Empire would mobilize every remaining fleet to push the humans back before they could strike the core worlds. But in his mind, he already feared the truth. If the Terrans had been planning this for decades, then every step the Empire took might already be part of the humans' design. And if that was the case, then the Empire was no longer defending itself. It was playing a game it could not win. The Emperor's call to mobilize every remaining fleet sent a wave of activity across the Empire's shipyards. Worked without pause. Fueling stations overflowed with warships preparing for deployment. Every commander was warned that this was no longer a containment mission, but a fight for survival. Yet even as the fleets gathered, reports kept arriving of Terran strikes deep inside. Imperial territory supply lines were vanishing. Entire shipyards found abandoned, their workers gone without a trace. It was as if the humans were everywhere at once, cutting the Empire apart from the inside in. A desperate move, the Emperor authorized the release of the Empire's deadliest weapon, the world burner, a planet-killing superweapon, so feared that even the Empire itself had vowed never to use it except in the gravest emergency. The world burner was a colossal warship, carrying a reactor capable of creating a chain reaction that could turn a world into fire. Admiral Kareth was put in command of the operation. His orders were simple: lure the Terrans to a single target and destroy them, along with the planet beneath their feet. Bait was a rich industrial world named Vorith 9, which the Terrans had recently approached. Imperial intelligence spread false signals suggesting the planet was vital to the Empire's war effort. Kareth positioned the world burner and its escort fleet in orbit, hiding its true purpose. The moment the Terran fleet appeared, the trap was sprung. The world burner's core began charging its massive weapon, but to everyone's shock, the Terrans didn't try to stop it. They simply slowed their advance as if watching seconds. Before the world burner fired, its reactor began to destabilize. The alarms rang across. The bridge engineers shouted in panic. Kareth demanded a systems check, but the truth came too late. The Terrans had already evacuated Vorith 9 days before replacing key structures with hidden charges. The moment the world burner released its blast, the charges triggered, forcing the weapon's energy back into its own core. The explosion was blinding, swallowing the warship and a third of the Empire's fleet with it. The shockwave tore through orbit, scattering wreckage for thousands of kilometers as The chaos cleared, the Terran fleet moved forward like a tide sweeping into Imperial space. They struck shipyards, crippling production. They raided fuel depots, leaving warships stranded. They destroyed long-range communication hubs, isolating fleets. From one another, the Empire's military machine, which had taken centuries to build, was being dismantled. Piece by piece in the capital, the Emperor listened to the casualty reports in silence. His generals urged him to prepare for surrender, but pride kept his mouth shut. The Terrans had humiliated the Empire at every turn, yet there was still a part of him that believed they could turn the tide, but in his heart he understood the truth. The Terrans had not yet shown their full strength, and when they finally did, there would be nothing left to resist. The skies above the Imperial capital were crowded with warships as the last of the Empire's defenses formed a desperate wall. The people of the capital world had been told victory was still possible, but their faces told a different story. They had heard the whispers of fleets vanishing without a trace of weapons that could kill without firing a shot, and of a human captain whose smile never faded. The streets were quiet, the air heavy with the knowledge that the enemy was coming, and nothing could stop them. When the Terran fleet arrived, there was no grand announcement, no demand for surrender. They simply appeared in high-orbit black ships. Gliding silently against the glow of the planet's sun, Imperial defense platforms opened fire. Immediately, but the shots never landed. The Terran ships shifted their formation with such precision that every barrage passed harmlessly through empty space. Seconds later, the platforms went dark, their systems dead without a single visible strike. The Empire's warships moved in for close combat, and one by one they too went silent, drifting helplessly above their own homeworld. On the surface inside the Imperial Palace, the Emperor watched from the grand balcony as the last of his proud fleet lost power above the clouds. He could see the lead Terran vessel, larger than any ship in the Empire's navy. And then it appeared on the palace's massive public screens, the human captain sitting calmly in his chair, eyes locked forward. That same slow, unshakable smile on his face. For a long moment, there was only silence and the sound of the city holding its breath. The Emperor expected a speech, a demand, a declaration of conquest. Instead, the captain simply stared, as if measuring the Empire's worth in that single moment. Then a voice came through the city's comm system, steady and deep. "Next time we won't smile first." And just like that, the transmission ended. The Terran fleet began to withdraw, their ships peeling away from orbit in perfect synchronization, leaving the capital untouched but stripped of all defenses. In the stunned quiet that followed, the Emperor realized what had truly happened. The Terrans had not come to destroy the Empire, they had come to prove they could. The message was clear. The next time the Empire thought of challenging them, there would be no warning, no laughter, no smile. The Emperor stood alone on the balcony, watching the Black Fleet vanish into the stars, feeling for the first time in his reign the weight of his own weakness. Far beyond the edge of Imperial space, the Terran fleet regrouped. In the observation deck of the lead ship, the captain stood with his hands behind his back, staring into the endless dark. Then his officers reported a new development unknown. Ships had appeared at the very edge of human space. Their designs did not match any Imperial record. The captain's smile returned. But this time, it was wider, colder, and somehow even more certain. Somewhere far away, another empire had just made the same mistake, and the humans were ready to teach the lesson all over again.